Hiya, I'm Oisin O'Nuallain from Oscar Wilde Walking Tours Dublin, and I'd like to cordially invite you along for a trip around Georgia and Dublin to discuss Oscar Wilde and his family, and we'd like to wish you a very, very happy St. Patrick's Day 2021. Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Willis Wilde was born here on a very cold morning on the 16th of October 1854. He was born to two very interesting characters. Sir William Wilde was his father, and he was a famous polymath. He was a surgeon, a thopmologist, a historian, an archaeologist, amongst many things. Oscar's mother, otherwise known as Jane LJ, aka Speranza or Lady Wilde, was a huge character around Dublin. She was also a very famous poet, and she was a lifelong nationalist. She instilled in Oscar a love of all things classical. We are standing outside Kennedy's Public House, one of Dublin's most famous literary pubs. Oscar Wilde worked here from 1871 to 1874 as a lounge boy and occasionally behind the shop to cut the corned beef. He also used to pick up glasses for James Joyce and W.B. Yeats's father. This is Sweeney's literary chemist. Where else would you get it other than Dublin that you could call a chemist literary? It sells the famous lemon soap. But a little known fact is that Oscar was in here on a daily basis as a child because it was the first dispensary for Sir William Wilde's Eye and Ear Hospital. Let's go in and have a look and see Dublin exactly as Oscar would have seen it in the 1850s. So inside this cabinet we have two very, very special books. We have a very early copy, first edition of An Ideal Husband, and we also have a book in Sweeney's where it was the first time Oscar actually got published. So if we just are careful here, we have to be very careful with this Victorian interior. And this is An Ideal Husband. And it's in good condition, PJ, isn't it? It's in very good condition with instructions from Oscar in it. So I had it at home, so we thought it'd be much better to have it in Sweeney's than gathering dust at home. So it's in a wonderful place where people get to see it, and people love the feeling tangibly to be able to hold it. By the time Oscar Wilde was 6 years old, he spoke French, Italian, working Greek, understood Latin and English. In his house, he had a French bonne and a German governess. It was after this, when he was 9 years old, that he went to Portora Royal School in Fermanagh. He was awarded a scholarship to read classics and Greek in Trinity College from 1871 to 1874. This was to have a huge lifelong influence on not only Oscar as a man, but Oscar's works. While the aesthetic movement is always associated with Magdalen College in Oxford, in Trinity College in the 1870s, they had their own aesthetic movement, and Oscar was one of its main proponents. And indeed, we know from the annual of 1874 that Oscar had delivered a lecture called Aesthetic Morality. Trinity College Dublin is a pastiche of many different architectural forms built up over 400 years in the college's history. So we have neoclassical, we have modern works just completed today. We also have Gothic, a famous Gothic building. In this Gothic building, just off the main square in Trinity College, is where the Philosophical Society is. And Oscar Wilde became the leading debater in this club. And at the time, his main rival was a man called Bram Stoker, who nobody knew very well. He had finished his degree and he was talking about writing a book which he hadn't fully got around to. Well, what happened was Oscar fell deeply in love with a beautiful girl called Florence Balcombe, and she was the daughter of a wealthy banker on Dame Street. And Oscar pursued her, and Oscar even at one stage proposed to Florence. When Bram Stoker heard this, he knew, being competitive, this was the way to get Oscar back. So he started sending Florence notes and letters, and eventually Florence and Bram eloped away. Oscar was furious and could be seen searching around Dublin for Bram Stoker, who would quickly run away into laneways and disappear. After all, Oscar was a heavyweight boxer in Trinity College. This is the Royal Irish Academy on Dawson Street in Dublin, and this is associated with the Wilde family for many, many years. Sir William Wilde had a huge collection of papers in here. Anything from papers about the Canary Islands, topography, the use of a census, and even the islands of Loch Corrib. The young Oscar was brought here from the age of 4, and by the age of 6 he was already debating with luminaries who came here, such men as Charles Darwin, Sheridan Le Fanu, to name but two. This is the residence of the Lord Mayor of Dublin, and we have had a Lord Mayor in Dublin for over 700 years. They've always been above the fray of politics and respected by Dubliners for centuries. They also lead the charity events in Dublin over time. This particular building is where Sir William Wilde got knighted by Queen Victoria in 1864. On this wonderful gala event in the Mansion House, there was a huge ball called to celebrate Sir William Wilde. He became the royal oculist for Queen Victoria and also was knighted for his work on the census. This building here would have seen, on that fateful night, Lady Wilde was resplendent, standing over 6 foot high, dressed in green, hanging with shamrock, which would be fitting for St. Patrick's Day, holding hands with her husband, Sir William Wilde, who had a hunch. He would have been down here and she was way up here. And holding Sir William's hand was little Oscar, and on the left hand side Sir William Wilde. And as they were walking up to the door, Queen Victoria herself, with the Lord Mayor of Dublin, came to greet them. But as that happened, a carriage went by along this road and they started shouting, for a scandal was breaking. Sir William Wilde was known to be fond of the ladies and was known to have one view of married life and another view outside in the street. At the time, a lady by the name of Mary Travers was handing out leaflets down outside St. Anne's Church. And these leaflets, I suppose, would have been the internet of the day. This would have been the Twitter of the day. And she was alleging that she had been raped by Sir William Wilde. This would turn out to be the biggest libel case in Irish history. And this case was actually solved in the end for a farthing. But nonetheless, it more or less bankrupted the Wilde family. So when people ask about how did they lose their fortune in Dublin, this case would also be a precursor and would mirror very strongly the case later that Oscar would have to answer for in London. Okay, we're now in the area which is happily a playground, and this of course was named in honour of Oscar Wilde and his brother and sister. Oscar wrote a set of beautiful fairy tales which I think are not just for children but are for all of us. In these fairy tales there is great moral lessons. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold the swallow picked off, till the happy prince looked quite dull and grey. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold he brought to the poor, and the children's faces grew rosier, and they laughed and played games in the street. We have bread now, they cried. Then the snow came, and after the snow, the frost. The streets looked as if they were made of silver. They were so bright and glistening. Long icicles, like crystal daggers, hung down from the eaves of the houses. Everybody went about in furs, and the little boys wore scarlet caps and skated on the ice. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder, but he would not leave the prince. He loved him too well. He picked up crumbs outside the baker's door when the baker was not looking, and tried to keep himself warm by flapping his wings. But at last he knew that he was going to die. He had just enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder once more. "Goodbye, dear prince," he murmured. "Will you let me kiss your hand?" "I am glad that you are going to Egypt at last, little swallow," said the prince. "You have stayed too long here, but you must kiss me on the lips, for I love you." "It is not to Egypt that I am going," said the swallow. "I am going to the house of death." Death is the brother of sleep, is he not? And he kissed the happy prince on the lips and fell down dead at his feet. At that moment, a curious crack sounded inside the statue, as if something had broken. The fact is that the laden heart had snapped right in two. It certainly was a dreadfully hard frost. Early the next morning, the mayor was walking in the square below in the company with the town councillors. As they passed the column, he looked at the statue and said, "Dear me, how shabby the statue looks." "Little better than a beggar," said the town councillors. "And here is actually a dead bird at his feet," continued the mayor. "We really must issue a proclamation that birds are not allowed to die here," and the town clerk made a note of the suggestion. So they pulled down the statue of the happy prince. "As he is no longer beautiful, he is no longer useful," said the art professor at the university. Then they melted the statue in the furnace, and the mayor held a meeting of the corporation to decide what was to be done with the metal. "We must have another statue, of course," he said, "and it shall be a statue of myself." "Of myself," said each of the town councillors, and they quarrelled. The last time I heard of them, they were still quarrelling. "What a strange thing," said the overseer of the workmen at the foundry. "This broken lead heart will not melt in the furnace. We must throw it away." So they threw it on a dust heap where the dead swallow was also lying. "Bring me the two most precious things in the city," said God to one of his angels. And the angel brought him the leaden heart and the dead bird. "You have rightly chosen," said God, "for in my garden of paradise this little bird shall sing forevermore, and in my city of gold the happy prince shall praise me." So I know this park very well, and this is a statue I really love, but I have a personal story with it because I was studying in Oscar's family home, and just across the road is where a sculptor, Danny, was working on his work, and I was with a girl called Megan, and her father lived beside Danny, so I got to know the sculptor when he was making the work. So if we look from this side, if we come and we approach Oscar from this side, we can actually see that from this side Oscar has a certain expression. From this side Oscar is looking pensive, almost caught in full thought. Now as we move around the statue, this is what Danny told us to do when we're looking at this sculpture. So this may be seen as a triad monument now, but originally it was just a statue. And from the front, he just kind of looks in a humorous kind of mode. If we come around the side here, Oscar is in full comedic wittiness, I suppose we may say. And this statue is quite amazing because when we come back over towards the front of this statue, we look at, people often think that this is painted. These are actually rare stone. In fact, the green naphrite jade, it comes from the Yukon in Canada, and this is associated with royalty and immortality. We have trachylight for the trousers, we have black pearl marble, we have Guatemalan jade. We have a wonderful collection of rare stone that Danny went around the world to source, so it was permanently colour, and I think it's a very fitting tribute to Oscar, and it's now one of the most visited sites in Dublin. But one contention I'd love to say is I hope today I've made it clear that we're bringing Oscar home for this St. Patrick's Day, and we're explaining to you Danny purposely picks the sculpture to have Oscar sitting on a big bedrock of Wicklow granite, which is of course where Oscar would have had a house in Bray looking up at the mountain where from this rock came from. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone all around the world, and may you have a peaceful and safe day. Thank you.
Ach insan hala Tevis jigto shiachon angolur Iston gok shandilog dalekre Ogus ogan brinlonu Shine amid Lachin is la la.